Claudine's book. Please come join us.
Find a seat or a stand or sit on the floor. It's all fine.
Oh, it's amazing. It's not a drawing. It's my
Should we read the whole chapter?
Sure.
Okay.
Focus so much on the second time.
I would say I'll read up to here, and then you do, and then I'll just come in when Claudine speaks.
Oh, okay.
Is that a good idea? In other words, I'll read these few pages
Try to do that. Go up to now.
up to
What page?
4. Yeah, you started right underneath.
Now she felt ready for Paris.
Yeah,
You want to start with that? Or I should start with that?
right below it when she just moved on.
Okay.
Yeah, that would work, I think. And then the only thing I will do is if she speaks, I'll say her part. If she speaks, I'll say her part, and then you read the rest of it.
Good.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Try not to. Sometimes I'm not sure whether it's her.
If you step on it, no, I don't care.
Okay. Great.
All right.
All right. Here we go.
Okay, we're going to do a joint reading. Oh, good.
And for everyone. I guess so.
We love it when the train. Hi, Carol. We love it when the train goes by before we start. First, thank you all for coming. From the bottom of my heart, I am just so moved to see everybody here. People, some I know very well, and some are new friends. So thank you. I am joined today by Roger Hendricks Simon, who is a theater legend. He has worked with everyone from Tennessee Williams to James Earl Jones and in between. As a director and an actor, it's my great honor to have him with me today. I am going to start after he reads the opening epigraph, and then he will pick up. Okay, Roger, you read the poem, please.
Claudine by Marian Grudko and T.A. Chapter 1. Divine Tailor, clothe me, change me, lose me, find me. Your raiment is my being.
Claudine was a ladybug who wanted more than anything to live in Paris. Surely she belonged there. Her red and black ensemble was equal to any creation from the house of Dior. And surely she would be noticed by the greatest directors of film. She bore a striking resemblance, did she not, to the beautiful actress Marian Grudko. When Claudine flew amongst the flowers in her garden, she didn't see that modest place in the French countryside. No, the garden was Paris in spring. The little path was the Rue de Rivoli, and the fireflies beside the small stream were the lights along the Seine. Each day, Claudine went to a rose bush, otherwise known as the Café de Flore. She thought of the moment when some grand literary personage would come, take one look at her, and begin his masterpiece, inspired by the mysterious air of that ravishing coccinelle. Sometimes Claudine spoke aloud to the characters of her imagination. "Oh, my darling, I wait for you." The other ladybugs who shared the rose bush thought her somewhat frayed about the borders. "A head full of clouds, that Claudine," they said. Claudine heard them. know, she thought, a head full of Paris. That night, Claudine packed a suitcase with her most precious possessions, a portrait of herself, a mirror, and the complete works of Simone de Beauvoir. The next morning, Claudine flew to the station to take the train to Paris. On the train was a tiny woman. She wore a black dress with a scarlet scarf. Claudine admired her immensely. "Hello," said Claudine. "I am going to Paris." "Of course," said the little woman, "but first you will need shoes." Claudine closed her eyes. She pictured herself on a grand boulevard, wearing the shoes of her dreams, white with red polka dots and very high heels. "You must go to a shop," continued the woman, "very near the Rue de Faubourg Saint-Antoine. It is in a narrow alley that is easy to miss, but look carefully, and once you have found it, ask for Pierre." Then she smiled enigmatically. Claudine opened her eyes. "Who is Pierre?" she asked. But at that moment, the train arrived at the North Station, and the little woman had disappeared. "What happened?" asked Claudine. Then she shuddered. The woman was a ghost. Or, oh la la, she was kidnapped by a frightful man with a hook. Or maybe she left like that simply because she was rude. In any case, the little lady departed quite precipitously. She had dropped her scarf and left it behind. Claudine could not lift the whole thing, but she thought she should take a piece of it as a clue for the police, should that prove necessary. She imagined herself dressed in a tiny trench coat with a fedora worn low, half covering her eyes. The doors of the train opened. Quickly, Claudine took a pair of scissors from the sewing kit in her valise. She cut a small piece of silk fabric from the inside of the scarf. "It does seem," thought Claudine, "that this piece of silk would make a perfect scarf for me." And she draped it artfully around her neck. Now she felt truly ready for Paris, except for shoes.
So when she disembarked, the bustle of the station was overwhelming. She had never seen so many of anything before. People were moving about with urgency and intensity, hugging and lugging their children, dogs, and valises as they half ran in every direction. Claudine loved it. The color, the energy, the excitement. It was contagious. Even though her suitcase was growing so heavy that flight was soon to be impossible, she didn't care. She would use her legs like everyone else in Paris. And if you must walk, you need the right footwear. She would find Pierre to begin her transformation into a genuine Parisian. How could she know that this transformation had already begun and that her wings were already shrinking, as if her mind was determined to make them vestigial? Feet were the way to go, and she had 4 more than everyone else. Deep down inside, she thought, that might have to be rectified too, if for no other reason than the cost of buying shoes by the half dozen. She reckoned,
Pierre is not a common name in France, so finding a Pierre who owns a shoe store should not be too difficult. And really, how many shoe stores can there be in Paris?
well, in her defense, there have been worse miscalculations based on ignorance, but this acknowledgement does nothing to abbreviate the amount of time it took Claudine to find the right Pierre. It was days. At last, she found the street, the Rue de Faubourg Saint-Antoine. The clicking of all those heels reminded her of the citadels back home. The alley had its own name, Rue de Glace. And this tiny street intersected another called l'Avenue de Vérité. One should not read too much in this. The alley was difficult to find. She walked past it 3 times before she could see its entrance. Of course, the store was magnifique. A salesperson approached her, thinking at first that someone had spilled a drop of strawberry sherbet. When he saw that it was a ladybug, he called for Pierre. Pierre was everything one would expect him to be, sans monacle. He seemed to have invisible plumage. He clicked and clucked as he walked. And what may we do for you, Mademoiselle Ladybug?
Sir, I was told you could provide me with some shoes that would make me worthy of the streets of this great city, that would make me a woman of Paris.
Ah, yes, a woman of Paris. I see. And may I ask why? I, for one, see no advantage over one over the other. He raised his hands, palms up, as if weighing woman of Paris and Ladybug.
If either has an advantage over the other, I would say I have it. She fluttered her wings and rose a bit. But sometimes change requires sacrifice.
She settled back to the floor.
If I wish to be part of this great city, this may not be the right look for it. Ladybugs may not be taken seriously among the literati, the artistes,
Madam,
the fashioned.
Madam, to quote the great Simone de Beauvoir, one is not born a woman, but becomes one. Now we shall make you a Parisian, providing you with the requisite footwear. Now follow me. We have a department for just such, shall we say, challenges as yours. Be confident that you are not the first, or convert to humankind. I myself am quite familiar with the process. To quote Pierre, why dwell on the process? We sell outcomes. Well, after an hour with this master, Claudine was what she asked to be. She looked in a mirror and was mesmerized and afraid. She looked back at the approving Pierre.
I'm not sure.
She said,
Two legs?
but yet 2 fabulous legs, mademoiselle. And as a woman, you are quite lovely. You remind me of a certain actress.
But 2?
It seemed difficult to balance. But given the more precarious support system and the height of the heels, a little wobbliness was understandable. I remind you of what Madame de Beauvoir said. Change your life today. Don't gamble on the future. Act now without delay. This is no time for vacillations. Embrace, enjoy. He crowed with pride at the transformation before him. And it was not long after that Claudine found herself sitting on the Café Littéraire, half stirring a cocktail and half smoking a long cigarette in a longer cigarette holder. She had already mastered the look of ennui that was requisite for smoke-filled lounges, cafes, and ateliers. Around her was the usual listless hum of the bored being served by the disenchanted, silently sharing their mutual disdain. But she was waiting for Luzelle, a young woman, bourgeois with the mascara of the proletariat, and just charming enough to be forgiven. Luzelle was raised well enough to know that she should arrive just short of being intolerably late. Also, she was profound. She wrote for a socialist newspaper, had several degrees from prestigious universities that her parents sent her to so she could learn to be profound. And they got their money's worth. Men were transfixed, though, really for her beauty. Women were transfixed, but really in envy. Claudine was transfixed because she was a ladybug and new to town. But vraiment, what is that defines a ladybug? What is it that defines a ladybug? Is it really a matter of legs and wings and colors? Is that what defines them? Or us? Luzelle sighed. Sighs were a form of punctuation for her. She had many variations, and she labeled her sentences with these susurrations. She was clearly not only profound, but a tortured soul living in a world that could only fall short of her expectations. Luckily, the world has more important things to do than to prove the likes of Luzelle to be wrong. Wrong in that shallow, self-absorbed way that makes the world at least consider dropping her down a volcano. Anyway, she sighed, we live in a vortex, my dear, a vortex.
A vortex?
Claudine asked. Yes, a whirlpool of hypocrisy and naivety and ignorance. We puff on our cigarettes. She mindlessly puffed on her cigarette. And we drink our little drinks. She mindlessly drank her little drink. And we watch the people come and go before us as if walking in circles. Dante-esque circles. A well-dressed purgatory.
Oh, that's terrible.
Says Claudine, noticing a stunning dress walking by, red with black polka dots that... She rose suddenly, but Luzelle was too absorbed in the notion of the cigarette smoke to notice. Claudine ran after that dress as best she could, for her 2 feet were killing her. And before the dress could turn the corner at Place de Coin, she was close enough to say,
Excuse me?
At a pardonable decibel level. The woman in the dress did not look bothered by the interruption in her stride. In fact, she turned to face Claudine. She showed only patience. Claudine, she said, you go back to Pierre. You look miserable. You don't match. You don't match at all. And she touched Claudine's cheek and sped on, while Claudine studied her reflection in the window of Jacques Malabier's salon de robe, and she felt sorrow for a lost one, which some might think inexplicable given these circumstances. She recalled sitting on a leaf as it rose and felt like a branch in a lake, gently, rhythmically, as the sun slipped behind the trees and the deer peered out to begin their twilight foraging. In the end, she found Pierre to be entirely sympathetic. He told her that he was tempted to go with her, but how could Paris survive without him? And, well, that she should not be a stranger. He said that being a ladybug and living in Paris are not incompatible if one is willing to live a humble life. But then, again, if you want to live a humble life, why bother coming to Paris, huh? A humble life. That lovely twilight image. Day fading, colors dimming, darkness defeating light. At that moment, twilight began to sneak its way into the city. Claudine's senses told her that her city, was taking a brief rest before the night began. There was a moment of silence, as if it were a solemn time. A solemn time. The time that the numberless lights went on in the streets and homes and restaurants and cafes. If she were still naive, she would have thought that stars had come to share in the night's festivities, as if the axis of the universe were the Eiffel Tower, as if that monument were a celestial maypole around which all things danced and spun. No, no. What is not compatible are the city of lights and the humble life. Are lions humble? Are oceans? Are stars? Then why ladybugs? I have not come here to live in the shadows, to hide among the nondescript, the indivisible, nor shall I leave.
Monsieur, I am a ladybug, not a lady. Why must I compromise and be only half of myself? I shall be my entire self, as I feel myself to be, and live as if I ought to live. Fireflies do not settle. Moths do not settle. They are simply too drunk to know the difference between a light bulb and the moon, which explains all those concussions. But they believe they are shooting for the moon, and they are racing toward it, full throttle. They are committed to their goal, as am I.
With a hug that demonstrated unusual emotion for a rooster, Pierre bid her to take off her shoes. And she did. And immediately her feet floated from the floor. He looked at her as she levitated. Look, I will come up with a compromise, but there is no compromise in fashion. We make statements, not concessions. Perhaps that is why I understand well what you are saying. So, we have some work to do. The two of us, to make you ready for Paris under your own terms. Very well, then. With gratitude and relief, Claudine, restored to her former self, first wiped away a tear, and then took her mentor's hand.
That is chapter 1.
And that is Donald who did the illustrations.
Many of you came here for Donald, but there really is a story here. Well, anybody who still needs signing?
Me.
We're here. Okay.